I'm Donna King, and this time on Issues and Insiders, we're actually trading places. Now, Marc Rotterman, host of Front Row with Marc Rotterman on PBS-NC, is actually in our newsroom this time with Carolina Journal, and we're talking about some of the trends and things we're seeing here in North Carolina. It's good to have you on our side of the our
great
side
juxtaposition.
It is. So we've been doing this show for 7 years or so. Mitch Coca.
It's actually we're into the 8th year now.
8th year.
8th year.
That's hard to believe. It really has become kind of a pace setter and talking points for the weekend on North Carolina politics.
Well, I think it has been, but you have other shows as well. But I think our pacing is what makes it.
I think so too. We really have a good civil discussion, which might be something we're missing in today's politics.
Yeah, but it is civil, and we don't take shots at people,
Sure.
And I think we have 2 state and 2 national issues. We do our underreported up and down the headline next week, and people think it's about the fastest 26 minutes in North Carolina.
It certainly feels like it when we're sitting at that table. Now, you've been in politics. This isn't your first run at politics. You really were an insider way before you were in front of the camera. Talk a little bit about your background in politics.
Well, I actually started, my dad ran Bob Taft's campaign against Metzenbaum in 1970, and I ended up being a field guy. And I was doing 2 years, I had already started college, communications and television direction, and I just got hooked then. And we won actually that year. I actually met Richard Nixon and the whole 9 yards. After Nixon in '72, though, I did a radio show out in California for about 8 years, 6 to 8 years, and then I went back to work for Ronald Reagan.
Sure. Now tell me about your Reagan years. How'd you get involved there, and what are some of those lessons you
Well,
really
my
took
mentor
away?
was Jack Kemp, and my dad worked for Jack Kemp. He was his political director and also his press secretary. And he got me back on the campaign. It was kind of amazing because I was not on a Pacifica station, but I actually did a jazz show, and I did the news, and then I walked in one day, and you can imagine they were a little left to center, and I said, well, I'm going to work for Ronald Reagan. So you could have seen the jaws drop. It was kind of cool, but I worked for Ed Meese and directly attached to him.
Well, let's go back to those Reagan years. What lessons did you take away personally from the Reagan philosophy, the Reagan approach to government?
Well, I was around Reagan for about 6 months directly. He had a farm that he stayed at. It was Jackie Kennedy's farm out in Middleburg. And what I learned from him, was humility. I've never seen another politician that commanded a room the way he did. It was almost surreal. But he knew exactly what he believed, and he was willing to delegate. But he trusted his lieutenants. But he was a very gracious, kind of humble man. I mean, he was strong when he needed to be. We were involved in the 80s when I went over after we won the election. I was into transition, but I was involved in the PATCO strike, which a lot of people, the air traffic controllers, when he fired them, people thought, you know what, this guy's real. I mean, he means what he says. And he said he was going to fire them if they did not ratify the contract. So it sent a message around the world that if you cut a deal with Ronald Reagan, you better keep it.
Could you do that today?
I don't know if Reagan could be elected in today's party.
Why is
to
that?
be candid. I'm not sure the way he did politics would work today, and I'm not sure some wings of the party would go for it. Reagan was very close to Tip O'Neill, and he used to say if you had 80% you agreed on, you had a deal. And he worked with Tip O'Neill. I mean, we got the tax cuts through. You got to remember, in '81. It was a tremendous time, but the thing we didn't know at the time, Donna, was how great he really was.
Right.
And because we were in the moment. I mean, I was a gopher working for him during the campaign, but I put together the briefing books and took Ed Meese around. We started every day about 6:30, and we didn't end until midnight. But when we knew we won is when it came over the loudspeaker, and Jimmy Carter had lost his own precinct.
Wow.
And so we knew
Lost his own precinct?
He lost his own precinct. And we thought it was going to be closer, but it really wasn't. And when you look at Reagan, there were giants. The people who were around Reagan could have been president. Jim Baker, Ed Meese, George Shultz. Those types of folks were top drawer. You look at the people that surround some of these guys today, and they're just not up to speed. They're just not up to the mark, I don't think.
Wow. Now, you left there and went on to work with some really prominent North Carolina campaigns. Talk about a little bit about your experience with Helms and Faircloth.
Well, I wasn't really involved with, my wife was involved with Helms, and we were involved with Faircloth, but I actually came in '84, left the Reagan administration, and ran Alec McMillan's campaigns. In August, he was 30 points down. We won by 320 votes.
320 votes.
320 votes. So it was unique. It was my first experience in really Southern politics, and it was a pretty tough campaign. And in fact, D.G. Martin thought he was going to win, and of course he didn't. And Alec McMillan went on. Then I went on to do races across the South. We were involved with Bush in '88, and Karen, my wife, was the executive director of the Bush here. We worked for Phil Gramm, which I was very proud of his race. And we were involved with Bush 43 somewhat. And I had an offer to work for Donald Trump in 2015, but I'd already started the show, and I didn't think it was really ethically right to be doing a show on politics and to be taking a paycheck from Trump.
Sure, sure. So you mentioned that was your first foray into Southern politics, and a lot's happened since you've been doing the show. Tell me a little bit about what your first impression was of North Carolina and whether it's changed today.
Well, it was rough. We ran tough races. I think today, though, a lot of this stuff is unsubstantiated. Karen and I never put up anything that we didn't have the backup on. And also, I think people now, it's a war where people just go after each other personally on TV with ads. I think that's wrong. I think you need to have some civility. I'm all for tough races on the issues. And I'm all for free markets. I'm all for limited government, which I'd like to see, and which I actually think Biden ought to be doing now, is turning to supply side economics. I guess I'm a dreamer. Some sort of deficit reduction cut, and opening up the spigots on oil would get this economy back. But the economy is in really bad shape right now. We're going to go into a very deep recession, and I don't think anybody who has not lived through the 70s or earlier understand what it's about ready to happen.
I think you're right. And tell me what you see that connection between the 70s and what we have today.
Well, I think Jimmy Carter was well-meaning, but his policies were bad. I think what they're doing now, he's just wholly, Biden is just dedicated to the progressive cause. And I think he's being driven by people on this green energy. It doesn't work. It's generations away. And what they have done now with not letting folks drill and just shutting down the oil fields, it's a matter of supply and demand. And you look, the stock market has dropped $7 trillion worth of money since he's been on board. It's down to 29,000. It was what, 39,000 under Trump, close to that? Sure. I mean, I think we're in a real problem here because interest rates are going to go up, housing prices. It's going to be harder. I saw a report today that young kids are not going to be able to afford a house in their lifetime. It'll take them 20 years to try to save enough money. So that's a worrisome thing to me because home ownership means a lot.
So do you think, we were just talking about the economy and all of these other things, what do you think the key issues in 2022 and probably 2024 will be?
Well, I think it's kitchen table issues. It's your wallet, it's your ability to buy groceries. I mean, groceries are up 13%. I think this is a had enough election coming up, and I think people have had enough. No matter what they hear from the Biden administration right now, they're not buying it. And I think that's a problem for them. And they want to talk about everything else but the economy.
Sure. And you've been in North Carolina. We've been talking about North Carolina politics over the last few years a lot. How in your time here have you seen North Carolina's prominence or not evolve?
Well, I think I think we're a split state. That's why you get a Governor Cooper and you'll probably get a Ted Budd. Okay? Or you'll get a Locke Faircloth and you'll get a Jim Hunt. I think or Helms. Okay? But I do think that it's changing here. I think the demographics are changing. And I think I think some consultants tell people to moderate right now. I think people ought to stick to their positions, that they're for free markets, they're for limited government. And the other thing I see right now is, people talk about abortion a lot, but is it a crime to be pro-life? I mean, that's what the media would like you to believe.
Sure. So do you think that North Carolina is playing a larger role on the national stage than we
Oh yeah, I
normally
think it
did?
plays it used to be just a place to come raise money.
Yeah,
But now it's a must, you got to stop by.
absolutely.
You're going to see in 2023, which I hope to have at least half of them on, all these candidates are going to come through here. And I think even if Trump runs, other candidates are going to get in.
Sure.
I think DeSantis is going to get in. You know, he's got a 60% popularity among Republicans nationwide.
Right. So going back to how you got started, what was the spark that got you interested in this?
Well, I mean, my dad was Kemp's guy and his political guy, so he grew up in Washington. That's all we talked about. I read the Washington Post when it's actually something worth reading. And you know, my dad was friends with Bob Novak. He was friends with, you know, most of the journalists. He was a reporter. He was the national reporter for Cox newspapers before he went to work with Kemp. So I was always involved in politics. But I mean, the first thing I ever saw that was really kind of got me going was we came up here in '67, and I saw Bobby Kennedy walk across the Capitol grounds. And it was, I mean, literally a year later, he was dead.
Wow. So do you think some of the values that you've come to know as part of politics, Democrat or Republican, that sort of civil discourse that we talk about a lot, you think there's a place for it today?
I think the people want that, but I think people self-segregate now. They go to CNN, they go to Fox. If you watch Fox in the morning, you're going to see the same thing at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They're pushing agendas, just like CNN. I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's what's happening. Clearly they're winning, though. There's no question about that. CNN's on the downside, MSNBC's on the downside. But when you start calling people fascists or Nazis, that's out of line. I mean, how many people did Hitler kill? I mean, you can't say that people who voted for Donald Trump are fascists, in my view. I think it's out of line. It doesn't help the discourse. The same thing with race. Once you start calling people racist, okay, then where does the conversation go?
Right.
You can't talk about it. What I'm most proud about Front Row is we have civil discussion, but as you know from being in the green room, everybody gets along.
Sure, absolutely.
You know, but they know where you stand. I mean, and frankly, it's very spirited, but it's not mean-spirited.
Right.
I think you've been a very valuable part, Mitch Kokai, the John Locke Foundation, a very valuable part of Front Row. And the other thing is, as you well know, I was the first president of the John Locke Foundation, just a little plug there. But one thing that was very good for me was when Art Pope exposed me to the broader statewide networks and the broader domestic, even though I worked in domestic policy for Reagan during the campaign, he encouraged me to write, which is his discipline, and I thought that was very good. He gave me a huge opportunity, which I really appreciate.
Absolutely. Is there any advice you'd have for somebody who's trying to get into this business now, get into consulting, get into politics?
Well, I mean, you have to be part masochist. That's just flat out. You have to be, in long term, you have to understand that it's a grind. And today you have the celebrity consultants. I mean, one thing I would say, Donna, when we came up with Reagan, it was for a cause. A lot of these consultants today, it's all about the Benjamin. It's all about the dollars, and they'll adjust if they can make money.
Sure.
And for me, that wasn't the case. Reagan was the cause.
The true believers, is there a place for that now?
Yeah, there is, but I think it's more in think tanks than it is in politics.
Very interesting. Good. All right, Marc Rotterman with Front Row joining us on Issues in Insiders. Thanks so much.